In many ways, what the Trump administration announcing makes total sense. Rare earth materials are essential for so much, from EVs to phones to defense hardware. So how is the Trump administration framing its push forward on critical minerals, and what vulnerabilities do you believe are out there and that the administration is trying to address right now?
Sure, Sean. Well, I think what the U.S. is trying to accomplish, I think, is vastly ambitious and perhaps far more ambitious than they recognize. I mean, we just heard Vice President J.D. Vance say that the benefits will be both immediate and durable in a very, very emphatic way. And I think this, again, grossly underestimates how difficult this is because we have to remember that China took 20 years to develop this rare earth ecosystem, from the upstream mining to the midstream refining and processing to the downstream component manufacturing. 20 years of calendar time at China speed and China intensity. So this is maybe like 60 to 80 years of normal industrial
Yeah.
time. So I think this is the magnitude of the task they're looking to undertake. So I think that's the first point, and perhaps a vulnerability. Well, I would say not as a vulnerability, but I think this just gives us a sense of how difficult this is going to be. And I think the second danger or vulnerability the U.S. faces in this is mission creep. I think of it as a maybe this is the U.S.'s Moby Dick, right? That it's going after the great white whale in a ultimately self-destructive, obsessive quest
Interesting.
that really may not be necessary.
Let's talk more about that because why now? What has changed or developed? Explain why access to all these rare earth materials, and I think there were 17 to 20 of them, and other key minerals. Why is it so urgent right now for the Trump administration?
Yeah, that's a great question, Sean. So, I see it maybe more as a psychological shock that the U.S. is still processing, because as we all know, for decades, the U.S. could do whatever it wants. It set the rules. It interpreted how those rules were applied. And now what has happened is that China has shown itself not only in capability to be a peer and equal to the US, but also willing to step up and say, look, if you don't treat us like an equal with mutual respect, there will be consequences. And I think this is really an enormous psychological shock for the United States. And I think this is a response to that shock.
You detailed very graphically how hard China has worked to not only mine these minerals, but also process them, which is a huge part of this operation. Compare how the U.S. has moved forward and the EU. Why did the U.S. not see this coming? I understand that geography is a big part of this. So many of the minerals are in China, but it seems that the United States could have made a push long before now, understanding how important they are, especially to the defense industry.
Yeah, I mean, that is a surprise, Sean. And, I think it's maybe more structural than perhaps the failure of any particular administration or any particular individual. In that, we know that structurally the United States politically runs on 4-year presidential cycles and
Right.
even shorter congressional cycles. So I think that forces a short-term mentality. And again, if we contrast this with the Chinese system, where China can not only set and articulate ambitious long-term, sometimes multi-decade goals, but has the political stability and consistency,
Mhm.
as well as the will to make these happen. So, the way I would describe it is this is only maybe one instance of a broader structural issue.
Okay, we only have about a minute or so left, but I'm curious if relations between the United States and China improve, how will that affect U.S. stockpiles, firstly? And secondly, do you think this sheds some light on why Trump believes that Greenland is so important? Although everything I've read says it is going to take a long time for the ice to retreat with climate change and have access to even begin mining these elements, which is going to be very difficult, then getting them out of the ground and then getting them forward to processing. You're talking about a long time.
That's right, Sean. And I would use the example of Japan, which in some very key ways is much better equipped to tackle a challenge like this from a political government perspective, from a technology perspective. They spent 15 years and they were only able to reduce their dependence on the Chinese ecosystem from 90% to 60%, and in some of the more crucial rare earths, really it still is at 90%. So, I go back to my original point that this is an incredibly ambitious undertaking that may end up like Ahab's self-destructive quest for Moby Dick.